Hello, today we're going to start a new segment. It's called When to Freak Out. I specifically called it When to Freak Out, not to panic, not to worry, because I'm going to talk about symptoms that we may have basically every day, but I'm going to tell you specifically when this can mean life or death situations. So if you have a headache, when to freak out, I'm going to tell you everything. So unfortunately or fortunately, there's no way I can explain you everything without this head. So our brain, actually, even though this is a center of the nervous system, the brain doesn't feel pain itself. So the brain will never hurt. Everything happens in the skull, in the nerves of the skull, and in the tissue that surrounds the brain, and in the vessels around the brain. So the first sign of a headache that you need to freak out is if you have a new headache that's the worst headache of your lifetime. Then it could mean that there's a bleeding inside your brain. So there's a bleeding somewhere here between the brain and the skull. The next time when you need to freak out with a headache is if you have one of two things. If you have a fever or you cannot bend your neck. We called it rigidity. So if you cannot bend your neck all the way and touch your chest with your chin, you might have meningitis. Basically, meningitis is the inflammation of the tissue that surrounds the brain. That's an infection, so that will give you fever. And because the tissue surrounding the brain go all the way behind, then the neck will not bend properly. So the third thing that you need to think is if you have any weakness in your arms, in your legs, or in your speech. So this is the signs of stroke, and stroke can initially present with a headache. But if you cannot lift your arm, if your face, one side is weaker than the other, or if your speech is kind of weird, you should run to the hospital and make sure they figure out that you don't have a stroke. And the last thing that you need to think about is, do you have any problems with the vision? Because inflammation of these vessels around the brain, around the skull, and the pressure, if the pressure in the brain is too high, this can cause changes in the vision. So now you know what to do. Now, even if you freak out, it won't be just a mindless running around and doing nothing. You have an action plan, step-by-step guide to how to take care of yourself.